Good morning, everybody. We're going to start looking at the Cold War, kind of some of the first stages of it. We'll start first by looking at what the definition is. All right, so Cold War definition is going to be a state of tension or rivalry. Right, it could be between two people, it could be between two groups. We're going to obviously discuss it between two countries that stops short of war. Right? So in this case, we're talking about the Soviet Union. And then let's get our blue versus the USA. Right? And we know that if these two countries ever decided to fight one another, we know, this is my mushroom cloud, nuclear war, the world would in fact be destroyed. All right? So we're going to do a chart in our work pack, but I thought it would be just a good idea to get the two up here for you to see right now. Right? This is just a big fancy word for ways of life. Right? So the differences between the two, right? Obviously, when we start thinking about the Democrats, these would be our blue. Remember we said color could be important. This would be the USA, and this would be the Soviet Union. Right? Soviet Union being communist. Now, some of the characteristics, we'll do the United States first, right, is we know that we, the people, are in control. We elect representatives, we elect the president. We also have a market economy where we get to make choices on what we want to buy and how much we're willing to spend, right? And then the two ideals, right, pretty much the big ideal of the United States is the idea of freedom. Now, the Soviet Union is almost going to be at the complete opposite end of the spectrum, all right? Right. The political party in control is the Communist Party, and they are going to make all decisions. So it's not a we the people thing, it's a we the party thing. Right? The government is going to make all decisions in the economy. They're going to determine what people can buy, what goods people are going to make. Right? And then the ideals here, obedience, discipline, right? Pretty much the state or the government. So I'm actually going to write state control. Right, that's pretty much the fundamental difference, is that the people control things here in the United States, and in the Soviet Union and in any other communist country, the government is going to control everything. All right, so here's the goal. All right, I told you that the Soviet Union is usually always symbolized with a bear. Right, so the idea here, or the goal, is to spread communism throughout the world. Throughout the world. The idea is that if the entire world became a communist state, right, there would be no competition, there would be no low, middle, and upper class. Everybody would be equal. Everybody would share in the prosperity. Right? When you get to high school and you do global, you're going to start looking at communism in more detail. Right here, we just want to discuss, the differences between communism and democracy in the United States, and then how it leads to the Cold War. Right? So here will be the goal. We know that communism starts here in the Soviet Union, right? And if we remember that at the end of World War II, as the Soviets advanced into Eastern Europe, they started to gobble up and take control of all these Eastern European countries. Eventually, they're going to become communist, right? China is another big one, and then we're actually going to focus in on North Korea later on in the unit. But the idea is to spread communism throughout the world. Right. We got two steps. First step is these would be steps towards the Cold War. The first step is the Yalta Conference. Right. Obviously, the location, the conference is named after the location that it's at. February 1945. So this is near the end of the war. Right. Here would be the goals. Right. To discuss German surrender. Right. What are the terms of the surrender going to be? We're going to divide Germany into 4 zones of occupation. That would be the USSR. Change colors. The USA is going to have one, Britain is going to have one, and France is going to have one. All right. They also agree to set up a Security Council. Let me move this out of the way. And then this is a biggie here. When the Soviet Union took over all those Eastern European countries, at this conference, Joseph Stalin agreed to allow free elections after the war was over. So the Allies leave the Yalta Conference content, happy that those countries are going to become free again. If we look over here at our map, okay, this is Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union. This is FDR. He's actually going to pass away a couple months after this. And this is Prime Minister Winston Churchill. So the big three meeting at Yalta. That's step one. Step 2 is going to be the Potsdam Conference. All right, it's going to be roughly 3, 4, 5 months later. Now the war in Europe is over. Right, now we're going to start looking at the war in Asia, the war in the Pacific. Right, so once again, how do we discuss what's going to go on in Europe? Here's our punishment from Germany. Now this one is a little different than the Yalta Conference because we're going to start having some issues here. Right, Joseph Stalin. Let's switch some colors. Joseph Stalin does not keep his promise. All right, and he does not allow those free elections. Those countries become communist, and they're referred to as satellites. All right, they're now satellites of the Soviet Union. Now, he had a lot of reasons for doing this. One is he felt that the other allies were trying to limit the spread of communism, so he felt that having those countries would be a buffer, right, would provide him some kind of protection against the allies. The second issue is one of the major opponents of communism, Winston Churchill. We're going to look at a speech that he makes a little bit later on in the unit. He is not going to be reelected, right? And he's going to be the new prime minister up here is going to be Clement Attlee, right? So we're going to write GB right here. He's the prime minister of Great Britain. So one of those, the strong opponents of communism is not there, right? And this is still going to be, a couple days before we drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? The U.S. does not tell, Harry Truman, who's here, let's get a darker color. Right? He was FDR's vice president, but when FDR passes away, he becomes president. Right? He knows about the bomb, and he knows about the discussions to drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but he does not tell Stalin. Right? He simply just tells him that they have a weapon that's going to change the course of the war, right? And he leaves it at that. Right? So you're going to start getting some roots of some distrust between the United States and the Soviet Union, right? And there are lots of things all along the way. For instance, the United States wanted the Soviet Union to declare war on Japan sooner, and the Soviet Union wanted to focus more on defeating Germany first. So there's a lot of going back and forth between the two, right? But ultimately, it's going to lead to a period of distrust. Right, which now leads us to the end of World War II. So this is what the map of Europe is going to look like. The dark shade are going to be the Soviet Union and its satellite nations. So these would all be communist, 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 all communist nations. And then the alternate is going to be, these would all be free and democratic nations. All right, obviously I'm not going to draw them on. So you draw all the lines. But you could definitely see there's now a split or a separation, all right, in Europe between the free and independent nations and the communist nations or the countries that are satellites of the Soviet Union. Right? We're also, if we narrow in on Berlin, which is right here, the capital of Germany is also going to be divided into 4 areas as well, right? And each of the Allied powers having a part of Berlin. We're going to have a whole video for what's going on in Berlin. That becomes like one of the first major hotspots. All right, so this is just a cool graphic organizer. So, hit pause, read through this. All right, take some notes if you need to. This just kind of, once again, comes back and pulls all the different things together, ultimately leading to the Cold War, which is going to be that period of high tension. So finally, it's on now. The Soviet Union wants to spread communism. Remember, there's our bear. And the United States wants to contain communism. So we now have a clash of ideals. Everything that happens in the world for the next, 60 plus years or 40, 50 plus years, right, is going to be related in some way to the Cold War.